Welcome to Family Matters, Legal Edition, a special monthly segment of the Business of Family podcast. I'm Tammy Buss, family business advisor and founder of Blue Roots.
And I'm Yola Ventresca, managing partner at Lerners LLP. Together, we're diving into the legal issues that impact family businesses, from succession and shareholder agreements to conflict resolution and governance.
Whether you're in the founder's seat, part of the next generation, or advising a family-run company, this series is here to help you navigate the legal side of legacy with clarity and confidence.
Join us every third Tuesday of the month for real talk, real stories, and practical legal insights.
Because in family business, the law isn't just about protecting assets, it's about protecting relationships.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to bring you today's episode featuring our very special guest and my partner at Lerners, Joe Hentz. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you.
To the podcast. Joe is a very valued member of our business law group at Lerners Law Firm. He is also a CPA. And before that, he was an infantry officer in the Royal Canadian Regiment, 2 deployments to Afghanistan. Joe was, and I have a personal story about Joe because he was an articling student and rose to the equity partnership so quickly that, you know, I was a partner when Joe was an articling student. And I remember thinking, I would like this guy to come work with me, but I determined very quickly, or he made it very clear to me very quickly, shut that down and said he wanted to do corporate law, and it kind of broke my heart, and I still haven't really gotten over it. Joe is very sought after in our corporate group. He helps people with a wide variety of issues, providing prompt, timely, and sage advice, and he has a special expertise in farming as a family business, which is something he knows a lot about because Joe is a 3rd generation farming family.
Oh, wow.
So in his spare time, being a lawyer,
He's out on the tractor,
being an infantry officer, he is also on the family farm. And so I couldn't be prouder or more pleased to have him here today with us.
That's amazing. And today we're actually going to talk about the intersection of farming, family, and law, and what makes really a farm family business unique in terms of the legal aspects they face and how to protect both the land and the relationships that they sustain. And as a 3rd generation, you understand the complexities that come around farming as opposed to just a regular family business. When you throw in families, you throw in business, and you throw in farming. That's like the triple whammy, the triple crown. So welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe, Joe, we can start off by you explaining from your really unique vantage point what sets farm family businesses apart from other family enterprises.
Yeah, thanks, Yola. I think like every family business, there's an emotional tie to it. But what separates farming businesses from other businesses is the land and the tie to the land. Often multiple generations, grew up there. Mm-hmm. They worked on the farm. They had all of their first family events on the farm. And there's an attachment to the land. On top of that, the land values here in Ontario have become very inflated. And it becomes a capital asset, a very capital-heavy business that doesn't necessarily produce the cash flows to support and sustain it in the long term. So there's some challenges from a financial perspective, but also a very emotional tie to the land.
You know what comes to mind is the Dutton farm. Were you Yellowstone?
Yes.
So I guess there's this tie between like livelihood, legacy, and that familial, those familial ties on the farm.
And also gender now is an issue, right? Because of going to the male farmer, but there's also female siblings now or children, right?
Yeah, is that recent? I would have thought that would have been something that's come into play.
I'm noticing it even today that it's still primarily a male-dominated, succession planning in the head, and like in your head, you're thinking of it being that But as Joe mentioned, it's more than just the farming; it's the land. So it's not just out there planting seeds, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's multiple different business lines coming on farms now. They're not just primarily doing crops and livestock. There's family members that are bringing other assets and skills to the farm, whether it be an engineering degree or a finance degree.
Mm-hmm.
They're bringing other businesses. They're opening other businesses, and there's a lot of opportunity where families can kind of leverage what they have in terms of an asset to develop other business lines.
And I think that's really important. And when you talk about families and business, let's talk a little bit about structures, because, what are the structures that a family farm can be set up as?
Yeah, there's a couple of different options. I mean, the most simple one is just a sole proprietor or a partnership where individuals hold the assets and farm it as an individual, similar to a small business. The other type of structure commonly used is corporations. And so when farms get a little bit more complex or there's tax advantages to be incorporated, you often see family farms be incorporated. And then sometimes they're held by multiple corporations for various tax and liability purposes. The other option is a trust, and that could come into play where you have a more complex family succession plan, where there's non-farming children that are participating in some of the equity or potential growth, but not necessarily actively participating in the day-to-day farming operations.
Because you're both a CPA and a lawyer, can we talk a little bit about the complexities around tax, involving, partnerships? What's the difference between that and corporations? And of course, there's capital gains tax and all this kind of stuff, particularly when you're transferring to the next gen, because from my experience, it's all about trying to defer the tax as long as possible. Right?
Yeah, rarely can you avoid the tax, but you can defer.
I said defer.
Yeah, so, a partnership really is just a flow-through entity for tax purposes, and the individual partners get taxed on the profits at the end of the day, whereas a corporation is its own entity, and it gets taxed on the profits. And then when it distributes anything in form of dividends or salary to its shareholders, the shareholders are taxed on their individual basis as well.
Are you seeing more corporate structures now with, the value of the land and going down from second to third to fourth or fifth, and instead of having, somebody with 2 kids and now it's, siblings working together, and now it's, you've got 8 people in the next generation. What are you seeing in terms of structure?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing that. There's some tax deferral for both individuals passing from parent to child of farmland itself or of farming corporation shares. The benefit of a corporation, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in the structure. So where you have non-farming and farming children involved or in the business itself, you can structure the corporation so that perhaps one set of shareholders has a non-voting set of shares. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's limited participation. There's a fixed value that gets assigned to those shares that are paid out over a period of time. Mm-hmm. We often see that where there's non-farming children who are going to benefit from it, but those that are taking over the farm don't necessarily have the cash or the means to pay them out immediately. Mm-hmm. So a corporation allows you to kind of put in place a structure that is very definitive, allows people to understand what their exact rights are, what their obligations are, without leaving too many things unwritten. Mm-hmm. That could cause confusion or some sort of dispute in the future.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Joe, I don't know if this is the case with farms, but a common theme in our discussions with the legal experts on the podcast has been that just given the nature of family businesses and the fact that you know each other so intimately, there are not the formal structures put in place up front, and that people don't turn their minds to that issue until later, and worst case scenario later is when something has gone wrong, there's a dispute. Do you see do you see informal agreements when people are coming to you? Are there not formal structures in place, or have there not been formal structures in place from the beginning and they're asking you to implement, or have we moved to a place where you're getting people coming in who have agreements that need to be updated? What are you seeing out there? What's the lay of the land, so to speak?
Yeah, it's still pretty common to have things just done informally.
Right.
Mom and dad control the farm, and they leave things either said or unsaid, and it falls to the next generation to try and pick up the pieces when they're gone. Family farms come with a history, and a lot of times what was done in the past or how they receive the farm is they expect it to be the same, but things have changed. They've grown in value. The farms have increased in complexity, and it takes a little bit more planning. We're seeing now with the values attributed to the assets, a lot of times financial institutions are requiring or pushing for family farms to formalize more of their succession plans. It provides, obviously, the lender with some security that the operations aren't going to be impacted by a death or disability that wasn't expected or may occur early.
Why do you think that they're delaying putting these, structures in place, and they're waiting for the bank to come after them to ask for something? Like, what is it about farming that delays that succession planning?
I think there are hard conversations that need to be had that are difficult. What are you saying to all the children that either are involved in the farm or not involved in the farm? There's also some legal liability issues there. Often where I'm seeing sometimes that generation, mom and dad, not receiving the farm till they're in their 60s, and they're looking at the next generation into their 40s that are eager to take on an ownership position, but they waited that long, and they're not necessarily sure whether that the timing is right. I always say to family farms that it's not an event, it's a process when it comes to succession planning, and you have to start that process and keep working through it. There's key points where you've gone past a certain point where you can't take it back, but it's important that you start working with them, maybe formalizing management roles from at an early stage, so they learn the business of the farm, and eventually transitioning some ownership interest, some voting control, and some equity to that next generation.
Now, what about the children who work in the business? I say children, like you say, a lot of them could be 60, are working in the business, and those who are not working. Like, so when you look at that sort of equality in terms of estate planning, if the farm is the largest asset, what are you seeing there if you have one of your children is working in the business or two, and then you have some not working? Because there's tax implications, there's a lot of different things, right? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, there is. And I mean, you have to assess what is the risk that they're taking on as well. So when those farming children or those that are active in the farm, if they're providing personal guarantees on the debt, they're taking some risk as well. It's hard to be equal in those instances. So fair is not always equal is not always fair is a common saying we have. But what we see often is, there's an assessment done by the parents to see what would the non-farming children should receive in form of through their estate, and fixing a value attributable to that, so that there's some certainty in what they're entitled to, and there's a strict payout schedule for them, so that they're not waiting for their siblings to pay them out eventually. The one thing that we often have to protect against is if farms are near an urban settlement area, there could be a sale event at a much higher multiple than you typically see for farmland. And so often we see non-farming children in those instances are worried that, the intention was for that farming child to continue their sibling to continue to farm. But if they're not going to do that and receive, a potentially large payout on a farm that is going to be developed, that wasn't the intention of their mom and dad for that to occur. And there's ways we can do to protect against that. If there's a sale event, then there's a requirement to equalize at a later date, that we can kind of take away some of those concerns from the non-farming children.
And in these particular cases, is this where a corporation is maybe a better structure?
It would. It does allow, with the different classes of shares we can create, a little bit more flexibility.
And, the great thing about working with Joe, I mean, you see already the wealth of knowledge that he has. I know for a fact that Joe works very closely with, our wills and estates group, with, the family law group, people, marry into the family, what's going to be their role on the farm if they are married to one of the children who is working on the farm and they're going to work the farm as well. How do we protect the interests of the asset, as you put it? I think that what you'll find with Joe is that you not only get this immense expertise that he brings, but there's also 3 or 4 people behind him in other areas of law that intersect with the work that he does, in order to provide you with a really bespoke and curated experience. So
I have just a question. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Joe. So as a lawyer and an accountant, of course, working in the farming community, you understand that. But prior to you doing that, was your personal family structure all set up properly, or did you have to go in there and do a little work?
No, it was set up. I mean, my sister and brother all have jobs off the farm, and so it made it a little bit easier in that instance. But
So
certainly
they
seeing it
didn't
from
get some free legal advice? It wasn't like your first case you got to try?
No.
Well, that's good. That's good. Because I know a lot, it's a, delay, like they push it because they, again, don't want to talk about it or don't know quite how to divvy it up. Don't really want to, right? Because farmers live forever.
No, that's what they think. But I mean, sometimes the decision doesn't need to be made today, but you do need to put some safeguards in place. Having a current will in case something does happen to you, that you're not leaving your family in a more difficult spot than they would be.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, what's usually the instigating event? So I understand that you would have people who have, set up with you farms that, have everything in place. But if we put that class of organized people aside, what usually triggers someone to come in and see you? What is there some dispute that's happened, or people can't agree, or there's been a death, or what commonly brings people to your door?
Yeah, besides those that are kind of trying to be proactive, I mean, often it's an unforeseen event, or I mean, it could be foreseen, but an unexpected illness, an untimely death,
right?
A health scare. Those things typically are what bring people to
Yeah.
the realization that it's not inevitable and that they're going to have to plan for what comes next.
And do you find, and you talked about the hard conversation earlier, you said, people put it off because it's a hard conversation. Is that something that you assist with or you facilitate? Just by virtue of the fact that you're the one that they're coming to, like you have to suss out what's been discussed and how do you approach that?
Yeah, we do assist it when we can. From a legal standpoint, we have to be careful about independent legal representation and conflicts.
Yeah.
There are other business advisors and family advisors that perform that role, such as Tammy, but that's where they're often suited to come in and manage that, have those conversations with the family around the table, try and force those conversations, determine what everybody's interests are, and what are their concerns.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about partnerships when you now have several owners in, multiple farms, and maybe you have, 10 farms and there's 3 owners in one and 4 owners in another because they're running it as a sole proprietor, and then trying to transfer that down to the next gen? Like, what advice do you give? Because I know that happens quite a bit, right? That you're just, siblings have gone in and now it becomes more complex when you're going to gen 3 or 4.
And when it gets that complex, you've kind of got to take off your multiple hats and assess: are you a landowner, are you an operator, or are you a farmer manager? Right, those are the 3 main roles in the farm business, and sometimes they are completely separate. Where you blur those lines and people don't have well-defined roles, that's where conflict usually starts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen that. Again, it's so complex, right? Because I do think that farming is a big business nowadays, and but it's the land ownership that where the bulk of the assets are.
Absolutely.
We're going to turn to a positive note, I promise. But
what this is all positive.
We are absolutely helping. But in terms of the disputes that most often arise, I think you've hit on a few of them. Speaking from first generation to second generation, perhaps mom and dad, ran the farm a certain way, and they want the kids to keep running a certain way. Kids have a different idea about how the farm should be run. What else causes consternation amongst farm family businesses? Lack of defined roles, I think, was another one that you talked about. Yeah, really
the lack of defined roles, I think, and not understanding what the timeline is. That next generation that's coming in, it's never going to move fast enough for them. The other generation that, mom and dad are trying to preserve what the family has built over the generations, and they see that any change as a risk, which it is. There is some risk associated with that. So it's really just working through a timeline and a process and making sure everybody understands that it does take time to put those things in place. And sometimes giving, the situation of the next generation that's coming in, delaying a transfer of ownership may benefit them as it prevents perhaps other creditors that they may have or matrimonial issues that they may go through themselves from affecting the ownership of the farm or the farming assets.
And speaking of marital issues, What is the first thing you would recommend in terms of, marital disputes, or, when you're going to third generation or on, when you have these properties, right? This land that you're owning.
Well, if there is a marital dispute, I definitely recommend to speak to one of our family lawyers
How do you put before you get there?
before you get to the dispute. So we do get involved, and I seek the advice of our colleagues in the family law department to protect it. We always look for a marriage contract before. Those are difficult though, especially in a small community where maybe the spouse that's coming in has known the family for a long time. Another hard conversation that sometimes just doesn't happen. In terms of other things we can do to protect it, it's really the timing of the gift. When is the transfer happening? Is it before marriage or after marriage? And can we set some protections up to exclude it from that family property to limit the impact if there is a marriage breakdown at a later date?
And, when you look at, this property as it's transferring to the next generation, or these properties, the farm, the property, have you seen it where you've got siblings who want to keep farming and siblings who want the cash? Because it's a lot, because they, as you say, they're very, asset rich, but a little bit of, low on the cash flow. So what do you recommend prior to these decisions or these arguments coming up that I think we should sell it because I need cash?
Well, if it's still with the other generation, the mom and dad, you have to ask them whether they think that their children can actually work together. Or are you setting them up for failure by putting them into business ownership together? And if that's the case, then they need to look to divide up the asset before they distribute it down to the next generation.
And what are you seeing happening now?
In terms of...
For what you're seeing with your clients, what are they doing?
Well, I would say it's a mix. So, where there's a history of siblings working together successfully, then typically things are transferred down, which without much planning for that third generation or the next generation thereafter, that'll be for the children to decide. But where there is, a concern that children might not be able to work together, then we usually look to the parents to divide up those assets before and distribute out separate assets so that they're not put into business together.
And do you encourage the family to start talking to the kids and the siblings to start talking about what they can see for the future? Like, do you try to get them in to have a vision of what they see as the next generation doing with the whole operation?
Absolutely. When the next generation's coming in, the first thing we usually ask for is, well, where's your business plan? What is your plan for the farm?
Do they have one?
Not always.
I was going to say.
Sometimes they do. Very well.
Oh, really?
It's a mix.
I was going to say, very few family businesses really have a big business plan, right? It's kind of been, the founders sort of ran with it, and the second generation's trying to keep it. And
Well, you see now with a lot of them are, going to some of the agricultural colleges and universities, and some of them have very sophisticated business plans actually that are, well thought out, that have their lenders' support behind it, and the families working to achieve it.
And how does that sort of mix in with, son, daughters bringing this business plan to mom or dad who's been running the farm for a while? Like, does that not cause some conflict?
It certainly can, especially when the business plan has, debt associated with it. You're going to the bank of mom and dad to ask for leverage on the assets to maybe, diversify the farming operation. So there's risk for them involved in that. And at that time, depending on when you want to do it, it's a good time for the mom and dad to look to reduce their own exposure by transferring some of those assets over so they know what their risk limit is and they're not, potentially putting the entire farm at jeopardy.
I think my daughter has discovered that bank. I may have to put that on my liability list. Yeah, I think.
So one more question. Sorry to interrupt you.
It's so interesting.
So how many of the families that come in, the farming families that come into your office, whether they be proactive or something has happened, have shareholder agreements or buy-sells in place with the siblings or with parents, kids?
I would say probably about half, where they're necessary. They do have them in place, or they're working to put one in place.
That's good. I've seen a lot of agreements that are not signed.
That often happens, get to the point, and there's one issue that we just can't overcome.
Can't get overcome, right? And actually, that's funny because that's when I say, well, you probably need to call me because there's some family issue of why that's not being signed. Right? There's something that's preventing it. So we need to work together and collaborate, like you said, working with your other, family law and wills and estates. I think it's important that you have a whole team to help these family businesses, whether it's farming or manufacturing or whatever, to actually make the best decisions for their family.
Yeah, And I think that one of the very unique things about Joe, because Joe really grew this practice at Lerners. We had a bit of this practice, but he really has taken it on and grown it. And I think that, you can see from listening to him that there's an instant credibility there. He's lived this. But I also think that he knows the right questions to ask, when to ask them. And I think your approach has been very successful, if I may say so. But
no bias here at all.
I think his approach has been very successful in terms of being able to get buy-in. What I was going to ask you, Joe, and I don't think I've ever asked you this question, is, if somebody's listening to this, you're in farming business and thinking, oh my gosh, like, I am that person. Everything is informal. Nothing's written down. I'm scared to talk to mom and dad. This Joe sounds very knowledgeable. I want to reach out. What are kind of the foundational documents or structures you want that person to get in place? Like, if you could synthesize that, what would you want them to start thinking about? What are, if you triaging, importance of legal steps, if I could put it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd want to understand about the family history and the business. What is the farming business comprised of? How do you operate? How have you operated? What are some of the challenges that the family's gone through in the past? Because that often sets the roadblocks that they're currently facing.
So, such as is it like financial or interpersonal, or what? Both?
A little bit of both. Often I find some of the farms that have been around for 3 or 4 generations now, there was some difficult times in the 1980s and before that kind of continue to affect that current generation that holds those farms. And that new generation that didn't experience it are a little bit more willing to take a risk. Having lived through maybe not necessarily all good times, there's been some difficult years, but not the years where we've seen 13 or 18% interest rates.
Right.
And how do you propose or suggest that families start to engage with the next generation who are not involved in the farming?
They have to have those conversations at some point with them, whether they obtain another advisor to assist them with those conversations, to guide a family discussion, but certainly having a family meeting and making sure everybody's voice is heard. Even sometimes
oh my goodness, you must be a family business advisor as well.
Yeah.
Seen enough of it anyways to know that it's important to have those conversations early.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe, just to continue on that, what would you want if someone came into your office and said, I have nothing, like there's nothing in place? Where would you start? So you have the history of the farm and what obstacles they've gone through. What do you lay down next? Like, what's kind of the first thing you want to put in place?
Yeah, I would want to make sure they have a will in place. Even if it's not their ultimate succession plan, it's a contingency plan.
Yeah.
So this is your 5 or 10 year will that saves the family in the event something were to happen to you. It would save a lot of unnecessary conflict and provide some direction to your family, even if it isn't your ultimate plan for succeeding the farm to the next generation.
Right. So the stopgap measure until you can flush something else out that's more fulsome. Is that
exactly?
Yeah,
and I find that even gives them it's a start, and it gives the farmers a little bit of peace of mind knowing that worst case scenario, if something were to happen to them, the farmers at least they've given some direction.
Yeah.
And from a legal perspective, having that will in place, it cuts back on a lot of administration that would otherwise have to happen if you died without a will.
Right.
I noticed that at the beginning we talked about the different structures, and we didn't really talk about trusts. And I know this is not, the will and trust area, but I don't know if we got a little bit of time here to finish this off. Is when would you use a trust?
Yeah, trusts, they're used usually when you're trying to establish an estate plan where your class of beneficiaries might not necessarily be fully defined. So that might be where you're involving children and grandchildren, and you want to spread out any potential capital gains over a larger group. Trusts do come with some limitations. There is a 21-year rule where they are deemed to be disposed of, and which results in a tax issue. So they're common where, well, I guess I wouldn't say they're common, but they're used where there's a larger class of beneficiaries, and you're not exactly sure at this time who is going to have ultimate control of those of the farming assets.
And is there a tax benefit to trusts?
It does allow you to spread over capital gains over a larger group of people.
Because I know tax is a big deal for farming, right? It's a big deal for everybody, but it tends to be one of the major components of succession transition planning is the tax.
Yes, and then trusts also do, because you don't have a defined beneficiary necessarily. You'd have a defined beneficiary class, but if, let's say, somebody were to predecease, or if somebody were to go through a marriage breakdown who was named as a beneficiary, the trustees would have discretion not to distribute capital to them, which does provide for some liability protection to the farming assets.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
We should keep talking to Joe.
Yeah, I know. This is great. I have lots of questions.
Really, yeah, so do I. But Joe, thank you so much for bringing your expertise. I really can't say enough. I know that we said, I'm biased. I am biased with a reason, because Joe really is a unicorn in the space, and I would encourage anyone listening who is going or is in the business of farming, family-owned business, to reach out if something here has triggered you to think, my gosh, I don't have anything in place. Reach out to Joe, with the assistance of Tammy, and having some of those difficult conversations. We can.
There's a higher cost to waiting.
That's right. That's it.
There is
a higher cost to waiting.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Joe, for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for coming in.